is a kind of we all know it's a failed opportunity on our part, but you know, you
Well,
can only
for
push us.
Omniac it's failed, but for
You
this
can only
one, maybe we have a chance. What you
we can only
presented was
push
great, by the way.
we can only push strings so far, is the point, right?
I like this
I
one.
mean, at some point, if no one's pulling on the string, it never goes anywhere. So, you know, that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
Okay, it's
Okay.
1:30. I suggest
So,
we get started.
yeah, thank you. Welcome everyone. This is the IETF 114 round session, routing overload power and networks. Um, um, so please be aware that this meeting is under not well, and we will not read it, but you have, if you participate, you have to review with the IETF process and policies. Then we have resources as depicted in the slides. Materials, please, minute takers. Do we have minute takers, Java subscriber?
Okay, we have Ivan, just volunteer.
Thank you very much.
And Michael, will you be on Java? I know you're a pro of Java. Thank you.
Good, excellent. Thank you very much. And okay, the meeting tips. So we request you to sign Miteco so we can have the blue sheets and to know who attend the meeting. Use Miteco to join the meet queue. That's as well required. Keep audio and video off if it's not used in the on-site version. For remote participants, well, mute unless you are speaking, and the use of headset is recommended. Okay, our agenda. We are going through the working group status right now. Then we have Pascal depicting the status of the projections, and then the 6 law multicast registrations, and we will have 10 minutes for open floor for everyone. Some comments on the agenda? Okay, thank you. So our draft status, NSA is received the AD evaluation, and the authors are working on addressing the open issues. All the variable is back to the working group, and as well we are addressing the open issues to be able to send it back to the ASG. The projections are going to be discussed today, as mentioned previously, and notice that this document is in working group last call for several weeks already, and we have not received any objections. So today we want to know your opinion, and if you agree with the document, we can just close the working group last call. And then the enrollment priority, those are working in addressing open issues. MOPEX and capabilities are waiting for attention. They were expired in November last year, so we will need to return to work on those. As well, we want to, for Repository Root Act, we would like to again issue the working group adoption for this document. For NFP, this work was adopted by the working group. Review is needed. Probably we will need to set up work items to work on this too. But now we want to focus attention on DAO projections in the document that we have working group last call. Thank you. Then we have our milestones. For this year, we aim for DAO projection, enrollment priority, MOPEX if possible, and as well close ODB Ripple. And then for next year, the rest of the documents, including the evaluation if what we have to recharge the workloads, as well probably start the rebuild version 2 or rebuild this. And then we have open tickets for enrollment priority, how the rebuilds, some they were closed, but there are still some open. Then as well for rebuild observations, we have future work items. MOPEX, we have one. Then as well to mention that on Friday, we are going to have a Manet, in the Manet meeting, there's going to be a discussion of multicast with Babel and Roll. So we would like you to participate. Yes, there is an agenda. Basically, present multicast in Babel, how is multicast in NN, in Manet as well. So this is as well kind of a brainstorming how to address multicast. But I think it will be interesting. And I think following this meeting, there is a both on multicast as well. So yeah, lot of work on those topics. Okay, thank you. Pascal, the floor is yours. I will pass the control of the slides.
Many thanks, Ines, and maybe I will turn on the video. I don't know.
So you should have the slide
Yes,
control. Okay.
on the video. Hello, guys.
Okay.
So it's very, very sad not to be with you today. But yes, we will do it remotely. And so this is about the DAO projection. So since Ines has already introduced the situation. So this is basically what we do. We build instances within instances, and you can call them overlays. And the overlays take the usual shape of a traditional Ripple instance, meaning that it's a geodag and it reaches some targets which are considered as external destination in RFC 9008. And basically to reach them from an ingress point which acts as root, you need to build a geodag, and we use typically non-storing mode to have the dotted lines and storing mode to join the dots, basically. So this is the things that we are building. We call track a complex dotted line, basically a geodag, a complex expression of a potential for a path between an ingress and an egress. And we call a segment a serial direct sequence of nodes, which we can install using storing mode. For instance, in black on the top, you see a storing mode PDAO, which installs a segment between a relay A and an egress E. So basically, you can also see that as a way to use Ripple to do traffic engineering and really to install what Row will be using to make wireless a lot more reliable. So summary of the recent changes. So we had a number of reviews. We had Lee. It took 2 rounds really to go through the edit. The second round included Michael's additions about amers and externs. And since then, I've tried, and thanks to Dominique and Ines to remind me, but I've tried to use amers when it was needed. 25 included a rewarding of terminology to make sure the terminology was more clear on the concept of legs, which is one possible path along the track, source route path along the track, and possibly a sequence of segments to get there. Then 26 was remove arrays. So the chairs asked Remus to do a deep review as well. So it was quite intense, but I think there was one bug that he found, and for the most piece, it was a lot of cleaning up. And so his review, the second step of his review went in 27 with Dominique's review. So then again, Dominique was very kind to propose, like Remus, for the typos, a pull request. So that's really appreciated. It saves a lot of time processing. So that was neat. And then Dominic had these comments in line in the pull request. So I handled them in line, and we actually use Get to discuss, but I copy the main results on the mailing list as well. So all the gory details can be seen on GitHub, and the summary of the changes on the mailing list. So there were a number of interesting issues that were raised directly or indirectly by Dominic's review. First thing is, and I think it's quite important, the sibling information option basically gives you so a node it sends a DAO with an SIO in it, and basically what it says is, I've got all those siblings. So these are the nodes which are one hop away from me, which I can directly route to. So basically that means, for instance, if the root wants to get one of those nodes along the path, I can forward to him. It can be a next stop. Or if he's a target, then you can build a track which terminates as me, egress, and I can reach those siblings. But it can also mean, if you have a packet to give to those guys, even if it's not a track, anything, if you give it to me, I can give it to him directly. And this really reminds of next stop resolution protocol. I guess in Mane, they've got variations around that, I'm pretty sure. You can basically say, hey, if I'm one hop away from the destination, well, 2 hops, I have one neighbor, which is a neighbor, then we don't need routing. Multicast DAO in Ripple was initially without siblings, just for direct connectivity. I'm here, I broadcast a multicast DAO. Everybody around me knows I'm here, no need to use a Ripple path to get to me. We are neighbors. With the SIO, we extend this to 2 hops. It's one of the consequences of having an SIO is we can do 2 hops away. And it's loopless, it's just having a common neighbor that can relay. So it was there, but it was not clearly stated. And doing the changes for Dominic, I realized that it was important to make it more clear. And in particular, what was missing is we were not amending RFC 6550 on the multicast DAO. The multicast DAO was explicitly for 1 hop. And now, because we have SIO, we can make it 2 hops. So I made the changes to make that very explicit, and I did a sentence which talks about amending RFC 6550. So yeah, and by the way, there is one IPR which was related. So it's not fully that, it's never fully that, but just in case, I asked the lawyers to add that IPR. We already had Cisco IPR on this draft. So this is a second Cisco IPR on the draft, which will, I mean, the guy promised me that he will push it just now. So before we do the Shepherd call, I will make sure that the second IPR, which really relates, well, at some point it uses those 2 hop things. So it's quite useful, in fact. So I will declare this IPR. Next slide, please. Oh, it's me, I forgot. Yeah. So another thing which came up as part of the discussion with Dominic, and that one also is important. Forever, we had that discussion about loop avoidance. I mean, we are in a situation that we used to call multi-topology routing, where you have the main topology, which is the main report, the ODAX, or the underlay, if you like. And you've got the track, which is an overlay. And when you do multi-topology routing, if you let a packet bounce between topologies, it can loop. Just depends on the way the topologies are organized. So it's very important that the topologies you're manipulating, or basically the rules that you're using for routing, have a strict order. So you can go from this to that, and this to that, and this to that, but never the other way around. Otherwise, you have a chance of loop. So the text that we had was clear that in the context of forwarding along a loose track, so to the loose hops, that you could use either a next hop, which is a segment to get to the next loose hop. You could use a direct neighbor or via a common neighbor using well, that's when we found that the SIO discussion was missing. But basically, if if you have a packet, you're along a track, so you're one of those loose hops. If the destination is direct one hop, then pass it to him. If it's not, but you have a common neighbor, then pass it to him. If not, but you have a segment route, basically a storing mode DAO, which reaches the next loose hop, use that. Else, it could be encapsulating inside another track, which effectively gets to the next loose hop. Do that, which creates a new encapsulation, but that's still okay. Else, drop. So you had all those methods, but what you didn't have is a strict order of them. So we clarified that to avoid loops, basically there is not only a preference to use direct hop if you have else, common neighbor, etc., but it's also a precedence, meaning that you can never take a packet of a segment and put it in a different track. If you're routing due to the common neighbor, never put it in a segment. It would be the recipe to disaster to loops. So the text is now, I hope, more clear about that. There are two things, though. One of them is a very old pull request, which really does not apply to the text at all anymore. But maybe there is something to dig into it. I don't know if Raoul is with us, but Raoul basically is the one who made that pull request. And I would have liked Raoul to chime in and look at the new way we do loop avoidance, basically, if it matches his intention in this pull request. The second thing is this preference of using a direct hop and then a common neighbor. Since segment is on the right, it's less preferred. Forwarding along a segment can use a direct hop, but it could also use a common neighbor. So today, the way the segment is written is you have to be in direct sight to the next hop in the segment. It is a strict thing. But we could have made it one hop loose, basically. The segment could be, you could be relaying to someone which is not your direct neighbor, but the neighbor of a neighbor, and that you would know using SIO. It's just not done. I don't think we want to take a big risk and change that inside the segment. But when the segment, you're done with the segment and you have to deliver, at least the destination could be via a common neighbor. But anyway, the way it's written right now is when you forward along a PDAO, which is a storing mode PDAO or a segment, it has to be hop by hop strictly. When you forward along a track, you have to deliver a packet that just your loose hop, and you look at how to forward it. Then you can use the one hop, two hops, or then the segment. So there is a slight inconsistency. If you look at the strict order, common neighbor is acceptable, has more precedence than segment. So common neighbor will not loop, even if you forward inside a segment at this time. It might not be very clear the way I say it. But basically, the question is, should we allow to forward via a common neighbor as we route along a segment? Mostly when we deliver at the egress of a segment. It's not fully consistent, the fact that we allow it for tracks, but not for segments. It's just because I didn't change the text and did not want to, I wanted discussion on this. So I hope we come back to that. And that's pretty much it. By the way, there is a 28 on the works, because I got the new feedback from Dominique after 27. And we found that something else of interest was missing. So it is, let me find, maybe I can share the diffs. Where are we? Yes, so the bottom line is we didn't clarify in this document something which is very clear in the main REPL spec, which is that each REPL instance its own rib. It's a VRF, if you like. It's its own rib. So when a REPL node runs 2 instances already with 6550, when you forward along an instance, you really use one VRF, and if you can never go from one instance to the other. It was already there. It was important. They are shipped in the night, and that's why we tag the packet with the hop-by-hop option, the the RPI basically. The RPI tells us what instance that is. That allows us to look at which rib we forward against, and we can only use this rib. That's why, again, we avoid loops in this multi-topology routing thing. It was already there with REPL, but it was not really said, again, in this document, that, yeah, even if you do an overlay inside the main DODAG, it's still another DODAG, so it's still another instance, and still it's a different rib. And you have to forward along that rib, unless you have a common neighbor, unless you have a one hop. So I added some text to just clarify that. It doesn't change anything, it just clarifies that, each instance is a rib for the router. Multiple instances, multiple ribs, and then forward along. So that's one thing you will find in 28. And if there are comments today, then I'd be glad to add them to 28 as well, and so I can publish it.
So, any comments on this? I can't see any comment in the room. Anything in the chat? Nope.
So everyone is accept this via common neighbor?
Sorry?
About the proposal that you say common neighbor. I think it's okay, but some comments about that?
Yeah, just think about next stop resolution protocol, next stop discovery protocols. It's basically the fact that if you have a common neighbor, then it will relay without a loop and without a routing protocol. I mean, that's in Mane, that's a usual thing. Just that REPL was not using it because we didn't have the sibling, but now we have it, so we need to leverage it in full.
Thank you. About overlapping legs, when it will be needed? Because it's not clear to me so much.
What will be needed? I'm sorry.
Sorry, overlapping legs, interleg segments, like north-south.
Oh,
when you
north-south we cannot do, because so if you go, that's when we refer to the row architecture. So that's another interesting discussion, and Alvaro is in the room, so I will like just to say, hey, Alvaro, there's one for you here. Basically, one consumer for what we are doing here is row. Row needs those tracks, and row has defined them. So I refrained to do too much definition in this document. We wanted to keep the two completely consistent. And so row has a concept of track, which is a little bit wider than what REPL can build. Because in REPL, we have a DODAG, meaning that all the links are oriented. So you go east-west from source to destination. With row, there is also north-south. North-south is bidirectional. You can use it up-down or down-up. Just don't want to loop. So you must have something which tells you how not to loop. For instance, a source route. But the link could be used in both directions. And the reason for that is in row, sometimes you want to do checkpoints to make sure that the packet, for instance, if you have a north path and a south path, having a north-south link to connect the two allows you to check if both hands have received the packet, and if they don't, then they share it. So now both hands have the packet and it can forward. So you can basically replicate over the north-south in either direction to make sure that the packet is there. And then you can continue to the west. this capability is not present with REPL because REPL does not signal sibling routes, basically routes which will be between nodes of the same cost. It was proposed very early in the design of REPL because of one big drawback of DODAGs, which is basically that the node which is closest to the root has no plan B. Because every link is oriented, at least the node which has half of the load under his on his arms, because it's close to the root, it's just 1 hop away from the root. Well, because he's the closest, he cannot not have a plan B. He cannot pass it to somebody else if the connection to the root is dead. So he has half of the traffic or so and no plan B. So routing between siblings around the root, for instance, would have been useful. But we decided not to do it, so REPL does not have north-south, still today. So that's why Row has a little bit more than what REPL can build. We can always discuss in the future how we do north-south, but the use case is basically this: if you want to replicate a packet on 2 paths, and you want to verify at some point in the middle that both sides, the packet is still there, was not lost, then you can reconcile. You can sync over this north-south. Basically, the first one which has it passes it to the other, and the other sees that, oh, I got it from him, I won't pass him. But if I didn't get it from him, I will pass him. And you see this kind of rule. And so you're sure that both sides of the north-south segment, now they have the copy and it can progress against to the west. That's replication reform.
Okay, thank you. I understood. And can you mainly, how can we differentiate from a track from a complex track? Basically, there is a metric, or basically if they have a lot of segments?
The term complex track was there to just explain that it's not serial.
Okay.
If you express something of A, .B, .C, and that would be your simple track, basically serial track. And now you would have segments between A and B and C, which would be the 1 hop storing mode thing. Now, with this, if you lose the packet, there is no way to get it to destination. If you have more than one possible path, then you have a complex track. The track is a potential. You can send your packet along this DODAG, and when it forks, you can choose to send it up through the up path or the down path. I mean, each time it forks, or you can decide to replicate or anything. That's Row. So how you use it is really Row. But basically, it's an opportunity. See the track as an opportunity. If a packet is not replicated, then when you forward and you have more than one next stop, you choose one. That's what you typically do with REPL. You choose one. Typically, for instance, you use your preferred parent to go to the root. But you have an alternate parent. You could have passed the packet to him, it would have gotten there. So the DAG is a potential. A certain packet will experience one of those potentials. It's going to be the path. So the path is the actual experience of one packet. A different packet may experience a different path between the same A and the same B if you have a DODAG between the two and you load balance or do whatever. So the path is different from the track. The track is the potential. It's the global set of everything that's possible. And the path is the experience of one given packet.
Yes. Okay, thank you. More questions or comments? So there is any objections to close the working group last call after these issues mentioned by Pascal were raised and addressed in the version 28?
Maybe I can state that differently. Pascal, we've been in working group last call for quite a few weeks, maybe a few months already. What's your opinion on the stability and convergence of this document? Given the various changes, additions that have been made in the recent weeks, what's your feeling?
Well, for the most thing, I would say that it was a lot of clarification. For instance, what I just said today, reply to you on the email, is something that has always been there. Each instance is a rib, but it was not written. So I think it's all going the right direction. The only thing and it's nothing new, the thing which the most surprising thing might be this SIO thing, which maybe people did not realize it was there. So again, it's clarification. So I just voiced it on the mailing list in your reply. I made a point today. So I hope if somebody has a problem with that, but it's a very traditional thing to be able to route through one hub. So I would be surprised, that somebody chimes in. But if somebody chimes in, today or on the mailing list, happy to address that. But no, you've seen the fixes that you've proposed, right? You made the document a lot more readable. And the guys before you, Torres, for instance, spent a lot of time asking me to reorganize to help the first reader. Then we had all the reviews that I showed. We had a good number of reviews. If you look at my slides for the previous IETF and the one before, I always retrofit the last 4 or 5 the items. You see, it's a lot of clarification, a lot of typos as well. Sorry for that, but it's all going in one direction. That's basically my answer to you. We have not forked. We have refined, clarified, but I don't think it's all stabilization. It's not forking to something completely new at the last minute. So I'm good. Basically.
Okay, so I'm hearing from your point of view, we have converged on this document.
Yes, and I'm sorry because I was telling Alvaro I have a point for you. The point for you, Alvaro, was that I'm referring the raw architecture for the terminology of tracks. And because it's terminology, I made it the normative reference. Problem is the raw architecture is still on the works. It's in last call type of situation, but it's still on the works. And so, and by the way, I'm pretty sure it's going to end up as an informational. So we'll be in this double situation of a done ref to informational, and basically this document will be held by the raw architecture. The alternate was to redefine the terminology from the raw architecture into this document. So what do we want to do? I think it's more correct to do it the way I did it, so I did it. But if you prefer otherwise.
Hey, Pascal. Alberto Rotana, Routing AD. So is this?
Yeah,
it's
it
on.
is working.
Yeah, it's okay.
So I think referring to another document for terminology versus redefining is the right thing to do. Right? We don't want to define the same thing in many places and then have the definitions maybe not be in sync or et cetera. So that's a good thing. Don't worry about the reference and if there's a down ref or not. First of all, knowing that it's an architecture document, I'm sure that it will get referenced later by some other things as well. So that shouldn't be a problem. And I'm going to say, don't worry about the sequencing either, thinking that the raw architecture is a little bit behind, because in any case, my publication queue is relatively deep. So by the time I get to this, we won't have to worry about it anymore. Yes.
Okay, that's good. And if for some reason we completely abort raw, then I change that, obviously. But I mean, the architecture is on the right track. So I'm not. But just to let you know that it may hold this one. That depends on the different queues. John's versus Alvaro's. Okay, and that's pretty much it for me.
Okay, very good. So
so ready for PR? I will publish 28, and then you press the button. That's the deal.
That's the deal, unless I hear a strong objection here in the room or in the mailing list in the coming days. But
okay, so
we do that
at the end of this week, depending on the mailing list activity, if nothing wrong shows up, I'll publish because after that I'm in PTO. So I'll publish 28 and then rely on you. Okay,
Very
thanks
good.
so much.
Thank you. And you're back again for the next presentation. Okay. Pascal, did you just disappear? I'm trying to pass you the control again.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. Okay, so, well, I mean, I'm lost. Why do you pass me the
Yeah, I
control?
think, aren't you talking about 6-law registration?
Oh,
You're next on the
sorry.
agenda.
Yeah,
The whole
I
session
actually
is
I
for you.
forgot that it was there too. I'm sorry. I just
We
so
convened
yes.
20 people in a room just for you, Pascal.
Okay. So yeah, this is a work which is. Let me start the video again, just to be a little bit polite. Yeah, there we go. So this is a work which started at 6-law, but really the way it's written right now, it impacts 6-law, 6-man, and role. And the reason for that is we wanted to give a complete story across work groups. And that's kind of based upon some other histories. For instance, the 6-law ND versus REPO stories, which has been bouncing back and forth between 6-law and role. We did RFC at 505, and then we did RFC 9010. And to make something like that work, you have to think in advance in 8505 everything that 9010 will need. And obviously, when you write 9010, you realize that, oops, you should have done this in 8505 or something. So if we want a consistent story and as we build it, we might impact ND and we might impact REPO. So this time we tried not to make the same mistake and say, oh, let's build the full story and write the right impacts on the 6-law side and the right impacts on the role side. So next slide, it's me. So that's why we ended up with this single document. The document showed up at 6-law because it starts with what you register. In this case, we are talking about extending 8505 for anycast and multicast registration. And why are we doing this? We are doing this because we got some users which came to us and came to the IETF effectively and said, hey, we're good for ND, we live without multicast, and that's really great. But we still need multicast. And for multicast, we have the same problem as we had with ND, right? So the report creates a pool, a multicast pool by the router, which is exactly the model that you don't want in an IoT network. Because it means that the devices have to be awake, waiting for this pool, and reply even if there is nothing interesting to report. The devices prefer to sleep on their own schedule and tell the router when they like. And guess what? They already have 8505 to report that they have an address, a unicast address. Why don't we extend 8505 to report that you're interested in listening to a multicast address, or if you're participating to an anycast address? So basically, that's what we did with this document. We said, hey, the nodes already don't need MLD for ND, right? 6-law ND does not rely on MLD. Now there will be no MLD at all, even for multicast. You can register to your router, and the router will do what's necessary. So we have the same benefits as we already have with 8505. We have basically a host to router interface, which is completely abstract to how the router routes or now does multicast. So that was where we started from, but then we said, hey, by the way, what is the multicast for this? Oh, it could be MIPO, and that's what Wyson is doing. But most of the time, people are using non-storing mode. And guess what? We have multicast only in storing mode. So we said, hey, let's provide the multicast that goes with it for non-storing. And the very cool thing is we had all the tools in our toolbox for doing this. Because with RFC 9010, the Ripple and Aware leaves, we already know how to build tunnels from the root to the router that serves the device. So typically a device that doesn't want to do MLD is a low power device that doesn't want to do Ripple either. So it will do at 505. It will be seen as an external destination. And then there will be a tunnel to the router for him. So for non-storing mode multicast, why don't we leverage this tunnel? And so we said, hey, basically the multicast addresses are registered using non-storing mode, but basically the way it percolates will be very close to the way we do unicast, with only one thing: the TID will be omitted. That won't be considered. That's going to be next slide, because multiple sources can ask the same thing. And the root will do ingress replication. So there is no multicast tree inside the non-storing repo. There is just a set of tunnels between the root and the routers which serve the final destinations. And so we added this into this document, and we called it MOP5. So that was the discussion on AODV repo with MOP5, and we agreed that AODV repo is MOP4, so we can be MOP5. So it's still question mark, but basically we are there. So we have new flags in the ERO, and those flags are propagated in the DAO. So now that's basically consistent, the changes we do in the ERO and the changes we do in the DAO. So that's the cool thing about having a single document. And so we pushed it 3 times since last IETF, mostly clarification again, right? It was clarification, but we wanted to be quick with this document because there is a huge need on the Wyson side. So we really worked on it, and I got the Wyson guys to do reviews for us as well. So we clarified that it's an alternate to MLD where the device pushes that he listens to an address as opposed to getting a pull by the router. We clarified that the TID freshness assertion is not done because there will be multiple devices not synchronized that will do the same request for the same multicast or unicast address. So repo should not decide that the only good ones are the freshest based on TID, because the TID won't be synchronized. So it's not a unicast moving for which the TID is meaningful. It's just multiple registration for the same address. So don't use TID. Now, the most interesting thing that happened recently is this question that we did not really solve in 8505, which is what happens if the router reboots? And basically, how does the 6LN know that it needs to refresh the state in the router? Because until then, it won't get any packet. So what we did is we created a new RO status, which is registration refresh request, that the router can send in an asynchronous NA, which already exists in 8505, but this status is new. And the asynchronous NA can be unicast or multicast. So for instance, if the router gets a packet from a 6LN that it doesn't know, it's not a normal situation because you need to register to your router before you use him. I mean, for savvy or stuff like that. So the router should know about you. If you start sending him a packet, it doesn't know your address, he may send this new error status. It can also be an asynchronous multicast. In the case of Wyson, for instance, they have effectively a multicast channel. It's slow, it's periodic, but they have a time where the devices are synchronized and will listen to a multicast. So the router will have an opportunity to send a multicast arrow NA with an arrow status registration refresh request after it reboots. You can do it once, twice, 3 times, and getting a chance for the 6LNs to discover that it has rebooted. Now, it's not the only way that we propose, and that's going to be next slide. And by the way, I had an early discussion with Amanda on the INA section. So I've revisited the INA to fit better with the model that she expects. Basically, we used to call things sub-registries and registries. It was unclear what was a registry and sub-registry. There is no sub-registry. So all the tables, individual tables now are registries. And basically the web page, which aggregates a number of registries, now is kind of a registry group, or you can say it's under the name blah of the page. But the page itself is not a registry, it's a group or just a page. The registries are the things inside. So I reworded things in here and in DAO projection document as well. And you'll see that in 28, but it's all now fitting the way Amanda wants it. So this item I just said is next slide. Let's go to it. So the second thing that the router could do when it reboots is effectively send an asynchronous array. Now, sadly, this does not exist at 6man, and that's the reason why I'm saying this document impacts 6man. And Alvaro, again, this one is one that could deserve your attention. So you know that when you want to have a new option in array messages, you need to get the documents through 6man. And so we had the discussion at 6low yesterday, what we do with this option. And there are two things we can do. We can take the text out of this document and publish without it, or we can get the documents through 6man to say, to get their approval. And Eric Klein yesterday was more into, let's make it a separate document, which means that either we kind of block this document to make the other one a normative reference, or we live without it. And when we publish the other one, we say, oh, by the way, we extend this one with, as a potential user of this option. And basically what the option is just the time that the router has been awake. So if you register at 5 p.m. and the router, and now it's 6 p.m. and the router says I've been up for 30 minutes, you realize that the router has lost your state. And so you can re-register whatever. So it applies to 8505, it applies to this, and it would apply to anything that anyone is doing with a router and the router has rebooted. So Eric kind of agreed that it was of general usefulness, and so he was more into let's make it its own draft. So that's where we were. And so basically Eric has a task to discuss it with the other IDs, basically you and Eric Vink for 6man, and probably the 6man chairs as well. And come back to me on whether I should take that particular option and its processing out of this document, make it a separate document. So for me, it's either way is okay. We can live without the array option because we have the NA, so we still have a solution. It's good to have the array, the toolbox, adding it later. The only problem I have is the implementers of this RFC might not implement the array, and when we publish the array, they won't even care or know that it's there. So they will have to live probably with the NA. That's the only problem. Unless, like I said, we make the other document a normative ref, but I don't know how long it takes to take the other documents through 6man. That will delay this RFC quite a bit. Now, going through 6man, having its own document, I guess we'll have a much better result because 6man will hopefully pass it, but they will message it, make it more useful, hopefully. So that's where we are. So don't be surprised, Alvaro, if you see Eric coming to you and asking, how we proceed with this thing. I made sense?
Hey, about yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to say something. Yes, it makes sense to me.
Okay.
And neither 6low nor 6man are my working groups, so yes, I'm fine with this. When you're finished, I do have a couple of other questions for you. But
I'm done. Sorry. Go ahead.
okay, so what is the status of this in 6low?
Oh, we are done. I mean, the expectation that what was discussed at 6low was to trigger a work group last call. And I guess the chairs, maybe I should leave Dominique or Ines discuss this, right? Because you already agreed with them, I guess, Dominique. So I will leave you.
Yes, we did. So we'll issue working group last calls synchronously between the two working groups, and Sixlo stays the home for this document, but we're working together.
Perfect. That works perfect for me. The reason I was asking was not that, but was because of the relationship with PIM. And I know that I had asked that we discuss this in PIM. I know that you sent an email to the PIM working group. I refreshed the email a month or so ago to see if there was something, and there was nothing.
Yeah,
nothing
and Tim, actually, that's thank you, Alvaro, for bringing that up. Tim also mentioned that yesterday, and the answer, Timothy Winters, and the answer I made to him was like, we are not really doing multicast. We are doing ingress replication.
No, I
so
understand that.
There is nothing like PIM, right? Completely nothing like
my
PIM.
concern is that PIM does other things besides PIM, the protocol, like MLD, which is something that you're placing here. And the PIM working group right now is working on moving MLD to be an internet standard. So it would be nice for them to consider if there's other work needed if the signaling doesn't come through MLD, but the signaling comes through the mechanism you're specifying here. So I'm going to, so that you're not surprised when people come running behind you, I'm going to go talk to the PIM chairs, because I think this is important that the working group discuss that, at least that we get something, right? At least that we get no problem type response from them, but I would really like to see a response, because there's a lot of processes that are dependent on, as you mentioned in the draft, MLD snooping and some other stuff that would have to change. So if a host now starts using the signaling in a network that would otherwise be using MLD, someone has to do something different. So just so that they're at least aware, and that we get some positive feedback from them that someone read the draft, and that everyone's fine.
That's neat, Alvaro. I really appreciate the way I would like. What I'm mostly interested in on my side is whether there is something we would need to add in our spec here, because basically the whole thing about 8505, the philosophy behind it, is we have an agnostic way for the host to talk to the router. What the router will do with that, if it does REPL, if it does ND proxy, if it does Rift, if it does EVPN, we don't care. That's the router business. But it's important that the host always provides everything that's needed, and that the router cannot infer by himself. That's why the arrow has the sequence counter, because when you move, the routers cannot know what's the most recent location. You have to provide it to them. So the sequence counter, the proof of ownership, those things the router cannot infer. But everything else, like deciding to inject it and how to inject it, etc., long as So if MLD needs, because the router could, today what we do with this spec is we say, hey, if you have non-storing, you can use this new MOP5. We also say, if we have MIPO, you can use MIPO. But what else? Just like 8505, the else could be anything. But is there a case, something that MLD would like to get from the host, so that the router can proxy MLD on behalf of the device?
Right, and I think that as we've talked about before, 8505 and even the extension that you mentioned to this about restarting have broader applicability. And so, right, it's not only going to be in networks where Ripple is running; it may be in a network.
Exactly, it's agnostic. It's agnostic.
So that's the
the
point of view that I want to get from the PIM guys, and at least again, so that they're aware, so that if other work, not just in the spec, but other work that they might need to do,
That's
you might
fantastic,
want.
and I really appreciate that.
Okay, so I'll. It's too bad that the PIM meeting was this morning, but I'll have Mike and Stig chase it down at some point, and try and have some discussion with the PIM working group that they push them to actually say something.
Well, if someone could contribute to the workgroup last call and
Yep.
as a comment say, oh, either I'm good, but if he comes and say, please add this flag to the arrow because we need it, or this field, we have an opaque field where we can put 1 byte, by the way. So
Okay,
if there is
sounds good.
something like that they might like us to do, it's perfect time to. It doesn't change the philosophy or anything big, right? But it could be, what they want.
Right. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Alvaro. And that's it for me.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
There is
Pascal.
a question. There is a question, Pascal, in the chat.
Let me see. Sorry.
Yes.
Adnan.
Can we
Adnan.
use raw? Can we use raw for all type of address registrations? Then the second question will be that
Sorry, I'm
person does not
traveling. So
understand that.
Oh, that's a
Thank
great
you.
question, Adnan. So the TID is normally a sequence counter. What it normally does in REPL, in the arrow, but then it passed in REPL as the path sequence, is if you move and you send a DAO, then you compare the sequence of the different DAOs that you have, and the most recent sequence comes from the latest location of the device. So every route that you would have for an older sequence has to be invalidated. This is basically traditional REPL. Now, it was not said enough in the REPL multicast support in 6550, which is only storing mode. It was not said enough that the TID does not apply to multicast, because if multiple people register to the same address, they don't know what TID the other guys are using. They all want a multicast. So it's not, the TID was meant to keep only one route, only the most recent, for a unicast moving. For anycast, you want to keep them all. So basically, the only way to retract the multicast route is to time it out, to let the lifetime time out. And the TID cannot be used to say, oh, this one is obsolete because it has an older TID. Now, for the rover is normally a proof of ownership. And then again, we will need to do something like 8.9.28 if we want to exploit rovers for multicast. What I take from your comment is I should probably say in this document, as far as this document is concerned, there is no owner of the multicast address, so you don't use the rover, just the same way you don't use the TID. Now, in the future, we may have a spec which synchronizes the rover values and synchronizes the TIDs between the different requesters, in which case the rover would have effectively a significance. But for now, I guess I take as a workgroup last call command that I have to say what I say about the TID, I would say about the rover. Since they are not expected to be synchronized, there cannot be one value of the rover for this multicast group. At least with this specification, we have no way to force everyone to have the same rover. Okay, so and then was that your question?
yes, for the TID, yes, I know what you said, but I just want to know that you are removing the TID in future specifications.
Oh, no. The TID is very important. The TID is important, but only for unicast routes, because it allows you to figure where you know that, but it allows you to the routing to know what's the most
freshness. Yeah, most recent. Okay. And
but
I was thinking about the if.
Sorry, go ahead. And then?
It's okay. It's okay from my side. If I let me think, but if I have some question, I will email on the group.
Okay. Thank you for this. Actually, I will make a change. I have to take a note to say TID, but also rover. Great point.
Very good. We have 1 minute left. Any more questions in the room, in the chat?
I'm just starting this about this document about multicast. If you're willing to review the draft, please raise the hand.
The good news, it's not a big document. It's not the DAO projection thing. Or Rift, speaking to Alvaro here.
Okay, we had 4, so it's good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, 5, good. Okay, thank you very much. I think we can close the meeting. Thank you very much, Pascal, for the presentations, and we continue in the mailing list. Have a nice IETF week.
And
Thank you.
if I may, since I'm in the room, we have a few newcomers with a new attendee ribbon. So maybe we jumped quickly into detailed stuff. If you're interested to learn a bit more about what we are doing, what this is all about, you can come forward to me and we can have a 5-minute chat. So I'll give you the context of what is being done and the history of this working group if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And thank you very much to the Jabber taker and minute taker, Jabber scribe and minute taker. Thank you very much.
Dominique, can I ask you one thing? I don't know if you can, but can you go for me at the registration? Because I paid for the full trip, but I'm not coming for some reason. But they have a T-shirt for me.
So well, you want me to carry your T-shirt back home? Okay,
if you can, don't worry if you can't. But you know, if you can get my kit, I would appreciate. Otherwise, forget.
Okay, let me know which size you want.
Large.
Okay, I will do that for you.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
What? We had that last time, if you remember. You ordered one size, they would give you another one purposefully because they were odd sized. Okay, bye-bye, Ines. Oh, she's gone already. Yes, we are. Early September. Yeah.